My name is Kenzie Shofner, and I'm here with Lois Katt at her home in Lincoln, Nebraska on November 21st, 2017. So I guess we'll just start off. When and where were you born?
I was born in Kenosha, Wisconsin, 1936.
1936.
1936. And so, child of 14 children.
Wow.
I'm fifth from the top. There were 9 younger, so I became a nurturing mother.
Yeah.
Even when I was just a young girl, because we always had to take care of the little ones as a new one was added to the family.
Oh, wow.
So I came from a large family, and Kenosha is at that time a factory community, right on Lake Michigan.
Oh,
so there's a lot of factories there. American Motors, Simmons Brass Factory, the wire rope was made there. So there's a big factory community close between Milwaukee and Chicago.
Oh, wow. Gotcha. What were your parents' names?
My mother's name was Cecilia, and my father's name was James.
I love Cecilia. That's one of my favorite names. That was my great-grandmother's name. What were their occupations?
My mother, of course, a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was a machinist at American Motors.
And so you said how many siblings? 14.
Uh-huh.
And then what are their names? Could you go?
Oh, you want to know other names?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Bert, Jerry, Betty, Johnny, myself, Lois, Joyce, Jimmy, Billy, Gretchen, Charlie, Melody, Tommy, Michael, and Roy.
I feel like you've done that a couple times.
Yeah, all the way through, yeah.
And so how would you describe your childhood?
Very poor. Very poor. My father was an alcoholic. It was a very poor family home. There were times we didn't have anything to eat. Probably my first recollection of Christmas where you actually got a present was after my brother Roy drowned in a creek bed, and Salvation Army brought us baskets of food and presents. So I was in the 6th grade then, so probably about 10 or 11 years old. And then by then things were starting to look better. You know, they found a little tiny home that was purchased for $4,800, and the year before that we had lived in a garage. Wow. So it was sort of that kind of background history. I was fortunate in all of and all the rest of them because I had wonderful friends and teachers. Teachers were the ones who must have seen something in me, and they took me under their wing. And so it started, and when I was in middle school, junior high, Miss Bond, for the next 3 years, became a very nurturing teacher and taught me how to sew clothes. And so therefore I had clothes that looked like the other young girls in the school. So no one noticed I was any different anymore. And then by the time I got to high school, I just loved school so much that I just did anything so I could go to school. Because you were supposed to quit school and go out to work. And so I just, being stubborn, decided I was going to stay in school and work hard to pay my $10 a week room and board.
Wow.
So.
What did you participate in activities as a child?
None.
Would make sense. And so you said
I was always working.
Yeah. So did you graduate high school?
I did.
Oh, awesome.
The first one.
Oh, wow.
The other 4 didn't, but I decided to stay and graduate. And I wanted to go on to college, but there was no money for that.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And so, what were your plans after high school? What did you end up doing?
I ended up working in an office at Cooper's Jockey Menswear in their office for $48 a week.
Oh, wow.
And I worked on the addressograph and became a personal secretary for one of the gentlemen in probably the finance area.
And so, in your perceptions, kind of jumping forward, what was life like before the war?
I didn't really realize what was going on in fact, the United States. By the time I was 20, I had my first child. And so by the time I had one when I was 21 and one when I was 22. Then a couple years skipped, and then so I was involved more as a mother, and we didn't have the television on hardly ever at all, and the little bit I got was the radio, and I enjoyed music more than I did the news. So I really didn't know the news that much and what was going on as far as confrontations or world or presidents. I know I went and voted for him, but you know, and felt that was an honor. I think the first one I voted for was President Truman. And so that, but as far as worldly things, we discuss things, and not until we start watching 60 Minutes, and that became a family Sunday night movie time, that we all could sit in front of the television and have popcorn, cheese, and apples, watch 60 Minutes, and then all my 4 children, my husband and I, we dialogued on what we, so they became debaters and listeners right when they were little.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So when did you end up getting married?
I got married in 1955.
Gotcha.
I graduated in 53.
Okay.
And then got married in 55.
And then you had, so you had your child that first year, is that?
Well, yeah, in 1956, my husband was stationed up in Anchorage, Alaska in the Army. That's when you have to be drafted, and he was drafted. He was not service material. He was just a quiet, gentle, spirited man, but his number was brought up and he had to serve. So he went up there right after we were married, and so I joined him in July of that year and had my first baby with a lot of other young brides. Really, we were all young people, and we're all up there having our first babies. Came home the following year, and that's when the polio epidemic was, but I was pregnant again, so I got a shot. And of course, some of the military men did, but my husband was only a private, so they didn't get treated the same as upperclassmen. And I was pregnant with my second baby, and I was only home 3 days from Alaska when I delivered that baby, and he only lived 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And then within the following month, my husband went into the hospital with polio, and he didn't come home until September. He went into July and didn't come home until September. He looked like he was going to be paralyzed.
Wow.
So it was a shock at the age of 22 to bury a baby and have a husband with polio, and still living at home with his parents.
Wow, yeah. So how many children did you have?
So then I had, the following year, I had another son, and then 5 years after that, I had another daughter, and then 2 years after that, I had my last daughter. So I had 5 children in all, 4 are living.
Okay. Do you remember anything about the news of when the war was announced? Do you remember that time?
We were moving. My husband decided to go in the ministry, and so he left his business in Wisconsin. He was a radiator repairman, and they hired him in the Kansas-Oklahoma conference to serve a church down in Ellis, Kansas. And I think I was just busy with a brand new baby. Barbara was just born, and she was only 6 weeks old when we moved there. Then all of a sudden I got into the life of being not only a mother but a minister's wife. And in the little tiny churches, they didn't have secretaries or anything, so all those duties became mine, because I knew how to cut stencils and all that kind of stuff. So I became Saturday nights doing all the bulletins for church and all that. I think I was just too busy to notice everything that was going on. As far as Ellis, Kansas, was a little tiny community of maybe 1,000 people. And my husband got his education degree at Fort Hays State, and so he taught the 5th grade and served the church. So most of the family life or the secretarial life, or all of his typing was done by me. So we were just busy, and I don't think we'd had too much radios or anything on it. People didn't discuss that. But then in 1969, we moved to Chicago, so he could go to seminary and complete a degree in ministerial duties. And so he went into the Chicago Theological Seminary, which is now it's a 5-cluster seminary, and you can go to any one of the seminaries, apply to one, and you can use any professor or any scholar from any of the 5. And so then we moved from a big mansion-like home, the parsonage in Ellis, Kansas, to a 3rd-floor apartment in Chicago, right in the middle of the South Side. And it was a shock. And then I became aware of a lot of things, because the school our children attended were 80% black. So that was a big awareness to me, because I was always the majority, and now we were the minority, except for at seminary. But where the children had to go to school was a half a block away, and seminary was a couple blocks away. and it was a time of anxiety, a lot of things that we had to learn. We wore a whistle around our neck so that if there was any trouble, you blew the whistle, and within that time, police and that could be by you within 1 to 2 minutes. They practiced this all in this area. It was a University of Illinois campus, which also has a seminary. And so while we were there, then all this began. The awareness of if the student is taking classes, then the spouse is allowed to, and they want them interested in what they're doing. So the first time I was aware of anything was my husband wanted me to go to a woman's lib meeting one night. And it was a new big generational thing. These women were all going to be liberated. They were going to burn their bras and everything was going to start happening. And I was like, oh my gosh. So he said, go. And I said, I don't want to go. I want to stay at home with you and the kids. And he said, it'll be good for you to go. Well, I got there, and my first awakening was sitting in a round circle when people start introducing themselves, and they're young people, and I'm probably 34 by then. And they're all seminary students or taking courses there. And I was to introduce myself, and it got to me, and my name was Mrs. Bruce Katt. Well, you know the surprise on those ladies' name. Then a couple of them shouted, do you have a name? I was very meek and quiet. And I said, yeah, it's Lois. And I said it sort of quiet. What is it? Lois. Say that loud. And I said it. Well, by the time I got home, my husband asked me how I liked the meeting. And I said, I only know one thing. Tomorrow you need to go down to the bank and change the checkbook not to say Mr. and Mrs. Bruce Katt. It has to have Bruce Katt and Lois Katt, or Lois Katt and Bruce Katt. I don't care how you do it, but I have a name and I'm going to start using it. So that was my first awareness of even stepping out into a new, different world than I had ever been before, because I was always a mom in home, going to school meetings and being the head of PTA or something, but never with a voice. And then they started doing other little things, and during that time, I don't know if it was a year later or 2 years later, I'm trying to think when that all happened, in 1970, when the young people on the Kent State campus were marching again for peace and everything, and then the awareness, it was very aware. We had peace signs like this all over our neighborhood. It was a big hippie area. The women were free-spirited without their bras and the whole thing, and it was like an awakening to me. I was just fascinated to watch them. I couldn't be a part of it, but I was just sort of like, wow. And then when the Kent State shooting happened, the campus, that whole campus became alive with, against all the violence. Enough of this violence. We just had it. So then the awareness of the war, and that's what they were marching against at Kent State, and why these 5 lives had to be taken just because they crossed the line, and they shot them all down. It's just students. And so sort of near the church by the seminary, they had like a pillbox with machine guns pointing out to just let us be aware that things could be happening, you know. And there were silk screening T-shirts with a big blood spot with 5 bullet holes in it. And my son, who was only in the 8th grade then, I think, came home. He had taken one of his T-shirts down to be. So then I was aware that we were a family in a movement. They were aware of what was going on because of their school, and especially being with mostly black children. And when they graduated from the 8th grade there, they sang the Black National Anthem. So my children, that was an awareness for them. Because we had lived down in Kansas, we were protected in this little place, and I don't think there was one black man in the whole town. So that was our only awareness of any of that kind of. There was another feeling level, another level of stuff going on. Well, then during that whole time, I was still at home. I took care of 6 other children in my apartment along with mine, plus doing all the typing for professors. And you got 50 cents a page, but we didn't have computers. It was all on a key. And if you made a mistake, you had to do it over again because there's no whiteouts or no erasers. You could not use it on the doctorate program. And I was typing for the doctorates. And then I was typing my husband's, and if there was a stray person out there that needed a place to stay, he'd even bring them home. And so it was a whole different kind of lifestyle that I started liking. I was sort of protected before. of always staying in my home and never getting out except to grocery shop and do things like that with your children, to the parks and that. And I thought, wow, this world. And, even the president, secretary came braless to work. And I was like, whoa, that was unknown to do anything like that. But it's a freeing spirit. It's a freeing thing. And so I'm trying to think, the Kent State shooting probably happened in 1970. It's just the spring of 71 that a lot of, you've seen it on the news and everything. And then we start watching news. It was just all seminary night. We had a lot of guest speakers on all this kinds of things that were going on. And I think it was right after that, then my husband came home. He said he had to go to a meeting that night. And I said, what are you going to do? And he said, there's going to be a march against the Vietnam War from downtown Chicago into Grant Park. And I said, this is my first reaction, Bruce, you can't do that. You're a father of 4 children. And there was a lot of violence that showed on television, that people were being tear gassed and all that kind of stuff. And he said, and our daughter Catherine was then in the 10th grade. So he said, let Catherine watch the children. You come with me to the Lutheran Seminary tonight. We're going to be listening to what the possibilities are. So I went with him to the Lutheran Seminary and listened. And they just told us that this was supposed to be a peaceful march, and we're going to try to keep it peaceful. And we would be the marshals of parade on the outside, all the seminary students and spouses and stuff. And you'd wear a black band, and so you'd be identified. And then we had training. If you were tear gassed, we carried these wet rags in our pocket in a plastic bag to put over our face. And still to keep peaceful, just keep on marching. Well, I thought when I went there, I was going to go there to say, really for sure, you can't do this. Pretty soon I was caught up in the feeling. Something happens within a group and you get caught up in what's going on, and I did. I totally, from this quiet person who then changed my name to Lois Katt. I love still Mrs. Bruce Katt, but it was nice to have Lois Katt. And then on that Saturday, I believe it had to be on a weekend. We left my daughter Catherine in the home with her 2 sisters, and we took our son Peter with us. And as we left the apartment, she said, if you 2 should die today for this cause, I will not think it was good. As I walked down 3 flights of stairs, I thought, probably the wisdom of a child. Maybe I should turn around, but I was already caught up in it. I had my plastic bag with wet stuff and everything, and we walked down to where the L gets on, down about 4 blocks from our home, got down on the elevated, and we rode that down into Chicago, and there we met and I can't remember the plaza that we all met, but all of a sudden people were coming from all over, the sides and everything, and this crowd grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And my husband said, just don't worry about it, I'll be right next to you the whole way. Well, then you start, and it starts out with the peace sign, peace now, and then just chanting, and the movement, and it was like, whew, it was great, and I shouted, and I chanted, and I turned the first corner, and turned sideways to see where my husband was, and he had disappeared. So I was there, and I kept eye on my son, close by, and he was in there saying peace now, and then we marched. It was quite a distance, if I remember. We ended up in Grant Park, which is right down by Lake Michigan. And then they had the guest speakers and everything, but I know I didn't quite listen too much to guest speakers because in this massive crowd, I was still looking for my husband. As it dispersed, as the afternoon went by, I finally found him. He was helping someone. That's just his natural nature, but for me it was like pounding, what am I going to tell the children at home when I got home? So that's how I really got caught up into the Peace March. And from then on, I've been an advocate of most everything. So it got me in a movement that, and the children grew up in it. Barbara probably was only in, she started kindergarten while we were there. So she was young, but she was aware. She was aware of us leaving every once in a while and doing things.
Yeah. Such a young age too.
Yeah,
right?
it was a young age. The other ones were older. So.
Yeah. So, were your parents ever involved in any social movements that you were aware of, or did they ever talk about any of these issues at home when you were growing up?
Nothing, only the Second World War. And they were for Roosevelt, and they used to listen to night chats, the fireside chats.
Yep.
And that's all they would talk. They talked. That's as far as political as they got.
Mm-hmm.
But even though they had all the children, they did that night. They went when there was voting. They went out to vote. That was important to them. And so, but other than that, they never were involved. They were very quiet people.
Yeah. So I'm just going through some asking you repeat
that's
questions. Okay. So Barbara mentioned that you didn't have Nestle products in the house. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, about what you
Well,
meant.
I think, I don't know too much about the Nestle products. I knew we never, where we were at seminary, awareness too of Chavez out in California against the farmers, weren't getting their right. So we, for a long time, didn't have lettuce before the lettuce farmers, or potatoes for the potato farmer. Anything that Chavez was against out in California, we kept that kind of attitude in our home.
Oh, cool.
So if there was a farmer movement or a migrant movement or Free Angela Davis, and I can't find, I was going to try to find my pin that says Free Angela Davis. And it was handwritten, and pins were made probably for some seminary student, I'm not sure, but I had a pin that said Free Angela Davis too. And all those things were popping up all over the place. It was like everybody all of a sudden wanted peace and enough of this hate. And I mean, it's coming full circle again, only worse right now, what's happening. But then I was at a place at the right time where I was able to be a part of a voice. And now I have no voice. It has changed.
Yeah.
And part of it is, I think part of it is, when you're young and have a voice, it makes a difference. When you're gray-haired and have a voice, no one's listening. And it's an interesting concept. Yeah. And I still do, and I still go to things. And I went on the women's movement, and I marched on the Capitol here just last year with all the young women that were marching there that day with your wonderful hats on. I still want one of those pussy hats. And I still am for the movement, but it wasn't this. It was different then. I don't know why, because I think it was a war that shouldn't have been, and more people are against it. Right now, we have made the enemy, and even though all those beautiful people are being killed, no one's marching.
No one's marching. And so did you stay in Chicago for...
Only 4 years.
Only 4 years. Okay, so you did this all within 4 years.
All this in 4 years. Huh. It was huge. Huh. And then my husband was ordained then in the ministry, and after ordination, then you can put your name out there. Before he was only licensed, then he's ordained. And so he put his name out there, and he interviewed at a few churches, one in Salina, Kansas, one in Aurora, Nebraska, and we interviewed at both of them. And Aurora, Nebraska, he made that decision to go to Aurora. So that's why we ended up in Nebraska. We came to Aurora, and it was a culture shock. From Chicago to Nebraska, first of all, even the state, much less a small town, they didn't know anything that was going on in the world. And if they did, it wasn't their problem. And so I didn't have, really, we only talked about it, my husband and I and stuff, because how much does a minister able to really voice how he truly feels internally into a world where he's been placed in the ministry? Wow. So it changed a lot then. We still watched 60 Minutes, and we talked about it a lot, and the children talked about it a lot. But in that world, I remember the first time we walked down the streets of Aurora. What a free feeling, and no one was out walking. It was a beautiful summer night, and we said, all the freedom they have here, they don't even know. And we heard a little child blowing a whistle, and that was our protection in Chicago. And it went right through us all right away, because all of us felt it. Our children even wore whistles around their neck when they walked to and from school. And so to be in a town where a whistle is a plaything was and then that was a sequential, and pretty soon were there for 10 years in Aurora, so we became part of that community,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And so how did your activism change then when you moved to Nebraska?
There wasn't any.
Yeah.
There isn't any.
There isn't any.
Except here in Lincoln, Omaha, we're lucky.
Yeah.
Because then when we were able to march at the Capitol, he said, just call me when you ever need a person or a marcher. I'm there, and I do. I just feel bad that not many people are wanting to be physically a part of something that's it's going to take all their rights away from them.
Interesting. And this is jumping back, and now I just have another question. Did you ever take the kids to, other than that one time when you were marching, did you ever take the kids to anything regarding social movements? No? Okay.
So they just heard it around the table.
Gotcha. So you just came back and was...
Yeah, except Peter, he got to come with us to the march against the Vietnam War. But the girls, see, that's the sad part. The girls we left safe at home. And I just think, no, I just love the young people today, the women. They're taking a stand. And it's like, whoa, you go. And I just think, yes. But that was part of the movement that we got involved in our 30s. And a lot of parents didn't, but Barbara's parents did, and all my children. So that's a different awareness for them. So they're probably more in a movement cause themselves in their own way. And they knew how much a teacher helped my life. So out of that, 3 of them became teachers.
Oh, wow.
And 1 a nurse, because I worked as an aide in the hospital, and I love nursing. And that's always something I wanted to do, is be a nurse. And so I think part of that whole, what you have in your home and how you have it for your children, then the little bits and pieces stay with them. You know.
Yeah. And so now, I guess, reflecting in 2017, this is all happening. What do you think that we could have done differently as a country during that time? That's a pretty broad question, but...
I think the country at the beginning, when all things started happening after the Vietnam War, and then part of it started with President Kennedy being shot and killed. At that time in our history, those guns, I don't care, yes, you can have all the hunters and everything that want to have a gun. We do not personally have to have guns. And now we have become a society that they're thinking to protect themselves, every household should have a gun. I think if you have a gun, it's only there to be used. To who and for what and why. I think they say it protects our First Amendment, is it, or whatever, one against gun. That was done in the pioneer days and everything like that, when they needed a little more protection. And maybe they didn't, because they were really moving into the land of the American Indian, and I'm right now in that American Indian movement, that how dare we say that it's our United States, when our forefathers all came here and took it all away from the American Indian. So I don't like the thing about building a wall. I think we're setting ourselves up for more hate all the time. Who is an immigrant? They aren't immigrants, they're people. And I just think, oh my gosh. And our world is going, if we could have a few more people have a feeling level, not for me, myself, and I, but for them and those. And there's a saying when I always hear, those people over there, those kind of people, or that kind of person. What is that? That's a human being. That's a life. So I have a hard time sometimes when I'm in a group and there's a lot of dialogue. I have a hard time not really speaking out. And it's like, and I don't know why we have to bite our tongue, but if we want to be sociable, that's part of. And as the pastor's spouse all those years, it became something that you just were quiet. You just didn't listen, because it'd be against your spouse's profession. So.
And what lessons did you learn that you want others to remember about that time in history?
Just remember that when you're saluting the American flag, you put your hand over your heart and honor that, but not negate the people who kneel down when the national anthem is being played. They're not being against the flag, they're being against what is done in the world. It has nothing to do with the flag. I feel more slighted when people wrap their bodies in a flag, or they, in Girl Scouting we learned, I was a Girl Scout leader for about 24 years. We learned how to professionally take care of a flag and honor.
Yeah.
And then I became a field advisor in Girl Scouting. So
wow.
I was in Girl Scouting a lot. And so to burn a flag was okay. You just did it right. So it's just, I think we just have to be, I think at this time that's just coming up, this Thursday, that Thanksgiving, we have to be a people of gratitude and Thanksgiving and giving thanks for what we have, because we are a lucky people. And why do we have to be so angry? Everyone's angry, even in driving my car, people that are angry, and you see it on their face and they're pointing their finger at you and all that kind of stuff. And I always give them the peace signal, because I'm a peace person. Peace now, that's all right. Yeah, I wish we could be more peace-filled so we could honor all of our brothers and sisters. And I really like the Indian proverbs and all that. I think our American Indian had it right. We should not own the land. It belongs to us all. And yet I own this little piece of land. My first place ever in my entire life, that's something I bought. Because I always lived in a parsonage, so I never had anything what is mine.
Yeah.
And even though I say that about other people, I go, oh, but I live in this beautiful place, one person. And a young lady who came in from Norway interviewed me before she went back to Norway, and she said, for you, an elderly woman, you would never live in a house like that. You at least have about 5 more people there. You would never drive a car. Older people don't have cars. And in fact, young people don't have cars. We take our bicycles everywhere. So when she interviewed me, it was a totally different aspect how Norway is compared to the United States. So I guess it's all of our perspectives, and we have to keep that perspective. I think it's just opening up and getting to know people, know one another. Because once I start working at the gathering place with Feeds Hungry from the streets, right near the Capitol building, there's a house made. Now that's a grateful people. They might be, their clothes are weary and they might have a couple of teeth missing, but when they walk through the line and you just put one scoop of food and one after another, thank you, ma'am, and just the way they look at you and everything, we have to learn to identify ourselves with every person, and be aware of their politics and who they're voting for.
Yeah.
I could get on that issue.
Right. So I guess this is kind of, next question is kind of like that. It's like, have your views on social or political issues changed over time?
No.
So pretty true.
They pretty much, and because it was formed as a newlywed to a man who was interested in the world and people. And so that was formed at just a young age of 20, found the right person, right place, right time. That's the whole movement, and how it moved. It was slow and progressive. But I still have that we have to honor everyone, and you don't build a wall, and you don't grope people, and you don't talk foully at people. And I think the worst thing that's happened, and that's what the young lady from Norway asked me, and she said, what is the downfall of our young people today? And I said, Facebook, not dialoguing and everybody looking at their phones. You can go to a dinner table and about 3 or 4 of them bring their phone to the table in case they get a call. I like to have it back the old way, where the phone rang and one person answered it and said, they'll call you back, we're eating now. It's that whole thing that we're not having dialogue. And I'm noticing it in even our young little people when I travel. The whole family's going on a trip, and the mother and dad are on their phone, and they have bought those, like, whatever, it's a bigger tablet, and their children are all working on something. And no one's talking even at the airport. It used to be fun to say, where are you going, or where are you going? We aren't dialoguing. We need to, so.
Do you talk about your experiences with your loved ones?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Now they're not interested. But they have heard it, and probably heard it a million times. So a lot of that far back to the Vietnam War and that, except that was all that series was brought up, on PBS, their whole Vietnam War thing. And I tried to watch it, and I was into it about 15 minutes the first night, and I couldn't. My stomach hurt to think of all of because I have a dear friend who right now is really totally paralyzed in a wheelchair, and he was in Vietnam during the war, and that Ancient Orange that they sprayed all over everybody, he got affected by it, gave him MS, and he came home to slowly being crippled totally, that all he moves now is his tongue. And so it takes away war. I'll say my statement: war is not healthy for children or other living things. It's not good. It doesn't. I don't know why people have to be mean and think they have to take things from somebody else, and they only can do it by war, and I don't know what causes it. What makes people angry enough to do that to one another, to take another person's life? My brother was in the Vietnam War and came back and never be the same. Never be the same. In fact, he's lost somewhere in this world. I look for the person standing on a corner, and I look and I think, is that my brother? Could he be one of those that are begging on the street? I don't know. I haven't found him for 20 years. So the last time he visited me, we were walking down the street, and a car backfired, and he hit the ground. He thought it was a gunfire. And he said, did I embarrass you? And I said, you'll never embarrass me. But then slowly he stayed away a little bit longer, and then no, I've tried to find him, but I can't find him. So that's what that all does. And we think, it could be someone else's boys. That's why I think if all the senators and those that run our government had a son or a daughter in the military, they would change their ways.
Yeah.
Instead of being proud that they went and killed an elephant.
Yeah. No,
So you can put that in there.
Yeah, no, I will keep that in there, of course. So I guess...
Because now I'm on that. I have to protect the elephant. So right now I'm on that cause.
Yeah. And so I guess, just ending it, is there anything that... Because this will obviously go up online and people can hear. Is there anything you want anyone to know or to remember? Or?
I think it's just one of those things... if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Just be kind to one another. Every color of our skin, when we bleed, I took care of many in the hospital, we all have red blood. And we all bleed the same, we all hurt the same. So just be good and try to understand another culture. I think that's important.